Hello, alright, you're listening to the Gritty Bowman, home of gritty bow hunting films, interviews, tall tales, and a wee bit of manly boasting.
I'm South Cox, and you're listening to The Gritty Bowman.
This week on Gritty Bowman, we meet again with Aron Snyder of Kifaru International. Aron was on episode 1 of the Gritty Bowman podcast, and he was a big spark behind what got me motivated to actually do a podcast instead of keep talking about it. Aron is the previous owner of Rockslide, which is an internet hotspot for all things related to do-it-yourself backcountry hunting. At the end of this podcast, you'll be wondering whether you should shave your body smooth like an Olympic swimmer or not. You'll learn about chafing while in the backcountry and what you can do about it. You'll learn about Aron's preferred fire starter and the type of wood and gas stoves he likes to use and why. You will learn about backcountry shelter options that Aron would use in extremely wet conditions, like those found in southeast Alaska, and much more.
If you like this show, please go to our website at grittybowman.com and subscribe to this podcast and tell your mates and pals about us. Do us a favour and please take a moment to leave us a rating or a review on iTunes or on our YouTube channel. Send your questions and podcast ideas to grittybowman@gmail.com. If you're listening to this on iTunes, you can see the video version of this podcast on our website at www.grittybowman.com.
I'm Brian Call and I'm your host. This is my first podcast done over the phone and it turned out all right. We'll try to improve the quality over time. In the meantime, Aron has graciously volunteered to be on the podcast on a regular basis. So look forward to future podcasts over the coming weeks with Aron Snyder for more discussions about backcountry hunting and living. Without further ado, here's today's podcast. Okay, well, this is the Gritty Bowman podcast. We've got Aron Snyder on the call. Been trying to get Aron nailed down for a few weeks now to do this. We're both technologically challenged when it comes to doing this remotely. So hopefully we can pull this podcast off. So Aron, I had a bunch of questions for you. This is sort of my opportunity to pick your brain, and other folks can listen and get what they can out of it. So we talked about this the other day on the phone, just briefly. And I want to get into it a little bit more because I want to know exactly how you're handling this situation. Now, I am built like a Greek god, somewhat, and I got these really muscular glutes, and when I'm out hiking, I get really bad chafing. And we talked about this the other day. So I found some products I've been reading online. I got on a bunch of forums, backpacking forums, trying to find what do you do to handle all of the chafing and the rawness. Now, it's not bad when I'm just out hunting, but sometimes I have I'll have 100-pound pack on, and I'll be packing out in the dead heat of the day, and I'll be going 4 or 5 miles, and I just start sweating, and there's a lot of pressure back there, and I can get a raw. Now let's try to keep this as clean as possible. My kids might listen to this, but we might call it the ring of fire. Your bum hole gets a little bit chafed, or a lot, and so
it's the chocolate starfish.
Is that what it's called? I didn't know. So I researched. I liked anti-monkey butt powder. That sort of helped a little bit. I found myself constantly whipping it out and using it. And the other thing that I used a lot of was Aquaphor. And I don't know that was really great either. But still, I'm sitting here going, something must be wrong because some of my buddies don't have this problem, but I do. And sometimes it can be bad, and it can be like, I remember hunting for a week, and I didn't have anything at all with me. And by the time I got home, I was pretty bloody raw. So how do you handle that? And nobody seems to talk about it anywhere. It's like this thing that doesn't happen to anybody.
I think people talk about it when it's just you and another person, like in a teepee or making jokes, because monkey butt butt or a swamp butt or whatever, the different names for it.
Yeah.
Like occasionally hiking out, I will mention like, wow, I'm starting to get a case of monkey butt or goo butt or whatever. And guys, it doesn't happen very often with me. Now, whether I built up an immunity to it or what, but the one thing that I have found that makes a big deal, which I get called, it was on Bowsite, and I think people called me a gatherer because I shave myself. Like, of course, when you're, because you deal in CrossFit and you work in CrossFit. Well,
Yep.
I hang out with guys that road bike and do ultra marathons and mountain climb. And that obviously there must be a little more, maybe they're more in touch with their manhood and they're okay to say it.
Yeah.
They all shave themselves. And so I look like a 10-year-old boy going into the field. I shave everything. Like, I don't shave my legs as much, but like scent hangs on to hair. That's just how life is. So I shave, jokes aside, or I mean, I'm sure there'll be all kinds of shit talk or crap talking on this one, but I shave my armpits, my butt crack. I mean, everything is bald. And don't get me wrong, if you shave it with the razor, a couple days into that, it will feel like sandpaper. So you want to use like the 16th or 8th inch, clipper thing.
Clippers.
Now I shave my armpits with a razor, not year round, but when I'm hunting. But I'm sure, have you ever seen somebody trying to put scent-free deodorant on and they get dingle balls like 3 days in the hunt? You see a guy just reefing them out?
Yeah.
I'm not down with that. I don't like that. So I just shave everything and then I let it grow back a little bit so it's not itchy.
So you trim it like on the lowest electric razor setting, kind of like hair trimmer?
Yeah. Now my arms,
Buzzer.
my chest, everything, I shave that with a razor. But everything else, I trim it as short as I can, and I don't hardly ever get monkey butt. Now, wet wipes and toilet paper at the same time. A lot of guys wipe with wet wipes, and then they don't dry it off, which I think creates a problem because most guys, like for me, I've got like the poo kit. I've got hand sanitizer in there, toilet paper, and wet wipes. And so there's a stage. Wet wipes, toilet paper, hand sanitizer, in case something slips through, and I'm good. And I take all that with me. Now, a lot of guys, like with hand sanitizer, one reason I do that, whether it works or not, I get cuts, deboning and everything else. Right. That hand sanitizer, when I'm done, is the hopes less of a chance of getting blood poisoning. Now, that may be in my own little pea brain, but I've gotten infected cuts, and I haven't, since I started using hand sanitizer, I've never gotten an infected cut. So I just clean my hands really good when I'm done, and I haven't got any infections. And so, not to get subject to monkey butt, but that's my system with that. So shaving, manscaping, there was like a huge post on Rock Slide and Bowsite. You guys were calling us many things.
Right.
But, you take redneck flannel shirt shooting out of a truck over here, and then you've got fitness athlete over here, and everything in between. And so, some guys we converted that started shaving, they PM me like, dude, you're right, it worked. And then I get PMs that are like, are you like a woman? And it's like, well, if maybe some guys can, don't mind having stinky armpits, but once you shave, deodorant's out the window when you're on a hunt. I don't ever bring deodorant. The scent level is down tenfold because that bacteria holds on to it's holding on to your hair. So anyway.
So have you found that when you shave, your problem is just a lot less severe? Like you don't have it, it's gone.
If I was going to quantify it, like an 85% drop in monkey butt and stinkiness, it's gone. So
wow.
Yeah. Yep.
That's pretty compelling results to you can't, it's hard to ignore that. It's not like a small improvement. It's a vast improvement.
65% of the time, all the time. No, I mean, it works really good. I mean,
well, you were telling me that those endurance athletes that they're doing those 100-mile races, bicyclists that they're shaving as well, and
they look like powder on that movie. Yeah, I mean, they shave everything completely, and so a lot of the stuff I learned from mountaineering guys anyway. Not about hunting, but gear and fitness and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So same conversation. I think we talked about this. I was climbing a 14er with them.
Yep.
And I had pulled my shirt off, and I generally had, you know, when I was lifting all the time, shaved my chest, and it just grew out a little, like, you know, 3/8 long. You know, and they were calling me a woolly mammoth. And some of my buddies, they're like head and shoulders, like their head, you know, their hair on their head is shorter than on their shoulders. And I'm like, it's not that bad. And they're like, dude, you need to shave that stuff. And I'm like, okay. So I did. And that was a few years ago, and it's worked. So yeah,
All
that's
right.
what.
So that's something to take away. Do you use anything else? Like any creams, any kind of
I used
powders?
to Body Glide and that monkey butt. Now Body Glide looks like deodorant, so if you want to rub that in your butt crack and then hand it to your buddy for deodorant, if you want to laugh, it looks just like deodorant.
Yeah.
I don't use that hardly anymore. I say hardly. I haven't used it in several years, a few years, probably
Right.
4 or 5 years ago. But it has worked for some guys. I know my buddy on his lower back from the lumbar pad,
Yeah.
the Kafaru packs. He just didn't have, like, I want to say immunity, but at first when you wear a Kafaru, sometimes you get that lumbar pressure.
Yep.
So like the first time he went out, he had a red spot. So he used Body Glide for a while for his shirt where it would rub against it. And then it just goes away like anything, you know, after a couple more backpacking trips. But he'd stop and it was looking like he was rubbing deodorant on his back. I'm like,
Yeah.
what are you doing, dude? Well, that's what he was doing.
So did you find out when you're, like you mentioned, calluses? So, you know, wearing your pack, hiking like that, when you're out there in the wilderness, I mean, is that what happens? You build up a callus, you build up some kind of resistance to it?
I never had it. Some guys just don't. Like, we just sent some packs up to guys that were previously using a different pack, you know, company from a pack from a different company.
Yeah.
They've got it, and they immediately, I was like, are you getting any lumbar pressure? Because so probably 2 out of 10 guys, you know, from as a guess from the good people I talk to, will either be, one, we need to change stays, or two, they just need to toughen up, is generally what I tell them. Like, dude, you're just going to have to suck it up for a couple weeks and it'll go away.
Got it.
So,
All right, so folks out there listening, you may want to shave, do a little manscaping to ease the chafing if that's something you're struggling with on these longer hunts with heavy loads.
and I used to fight in a cage. So before you start any jokes about manhood, I made my living for a few years fighting in a cage. And I mentioned that before. You know, you're only as tough as you feel you are on the inside, and I'm plenty tough enough, so I shave everything.
Yeah.
And I don't have any problem telling anybody that.
Sweet. All right. So that one out of the way. Another question I had was, recently I was talking to a friend of mine, a guy, just a new friend. We met, we're talking about Prince of Wales Island, hunting on Prince of Wales Island. He actually, his name is Chris, and he runs the Sharp Sticks podcast.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a lot of Western hunts. He's had some cool people on the show. He had called me and asked me about Prince of Wales and hunting on Prince of Wales, and we were talking about shelters. Now, when I was there, it rained like crazy, and I'm going there in 2 weeks for bear hunt. I had gone. I've been there about the same time, late May, early June, and I've been there late August.
Mm-hmm.
Now, when I was there in late August, it was like Noah's flood. The rain came and came and came, and it was insane. Now, there was like an inch or two of water flowing underneath our tent, and there wasn't a lot of places on that alpine top where I could find where there wasn't just water, unless we hiked further down. And I wanted to hunt on the top. My question is, you know, in those circumstances, that situation with that kind of waterfall, with that kind of wet ground, what kind of shelter do you recommend?
It depends, and it's hard for me because we have a lot of guys, obviously, that take Kafaru shelters and use those, but they have Tyvek ground cloths or those ultra lightweight cots to keep them off the ground, because they can burn wood. That's the big reason. Like, when you can burn wood, even though the ground may have water or whatever, you can dry off your clothing. So for me in that situation, it's pretty much guaranteed. If I can burn wood, if there's wood to be burnt, I'm taking a teepee because I can dry everything off. Because even though the ground may be wet and you can work around that, you can't work around 12 hours of rain on your body, and I can dry that stuff off when I get back. So a teepee if there's wood.
So that brings up the other question. So I have seen some designs where there's a ground cloth where they use a Tyvek, or some manufacturers they've created some sort of bathtub style ground cloth that you can, so the water doesn't flow up over your ground cloth. I've seen some of those options out there.
Yeah.
And then, of course, you have a bivy sack. And I've never heard of these lightweight cots, though.
Luxury light cots. And it's, in most cases, if you're going like, you bring the gear that you need to adapt to what God's given you, right? So if it's a 2-pound cot or 2.5-pound cot, keeping you off the ground 3 inches, I'm going to bring a 2.5, 3-pound cot. It's like I gave mine, I was going to order another one and forgot, but I gave mine to my buddy Paul. He's the guy I'm going to shoot with. And he is in hog heaven every time we go where he brings that. Because he brings a pad and the cot, which is 3 pounds total.
Yeah.
But, I mean, he sleeps like a rock. Like, you can throw crap at his head. And the other weekend when we went, I don't know if you saw the photos where it was snowing and raining on us. We were had the teepee set up.
Yep.
Now that we didn't have water flowing, but we had 2 inches of snow when we set up the teepee. So once we got the stove going, in 48 hours, it'll be a dry ground, but it's just a crap pit. I mean, it's mud hole.
Right.
And so he had that cot. And of course, I'm in my bivy laying on the ground, which didn't hurt me at all, other than I had to clean my bivy. But he pitched that cot, and that's his. So when he's sitting in his chair, because we have ultralight chairs, all his gear is on his cot, completely out of the mud. I was not quite as prepped. So
I'm a castle, man. That sounds pretty sweet.
Oh, well, when you fill up a 8,200 cubic inch pack for an overnight trip, you've got some good gear. Because on those trips, we bring lots of clothes just in case and everything else. But that cot, anytime it's not balls to the walls, crazy hunt, he brings that cot. And I hunted Prince of Wales once. Same thing. It rained enough it looked like, Noah was coming, right? It was bad. And but what I did or whatever, when because I had at that time I was just poor and could only afford a tarp. This is before I got involved with Kafaru. Yeah, I just had to suck it up, and it was bad because everything was wet. And once you're wet and the sun's not coming out, if you're wet, there's hope in your heart, the sun will come. No,
right.
When it's not coming, it takes a pretty good mental attitude to keep going when everything you own is soaking wet.
I was wet from the waist down for 7 days, period. Wet. Now, I was able to keep my top half dry and more or less, get outside and hunt in those conditions, even though. But you're right. There was no way to dry out anything. It was wet. Once it was wet for the whole trip. But
you had wood to burn there, right? You guys towards the trees?
That's what I was going to ask next is there's wood all over, but it's so wet.
Yeah.
How do you burn?
Once you get, I use trioxane tablets, you can put Vaseline on the whatever cotton balls and all that, but I use trioxane tablets. And so I just start with tiny wood. That trioxane will dry out that wood, get it to burn.
What is it called? Trioxane?
Trioxane, yeah. You want me to, I can grab one real quick. I got them right here.
Grab it real quick.
Like I said, the gear's all over my floor. I'm packing in, believe it or not, 5 miles on a turkey hunt. So I was packing right before we started this. So it's just, that's it.
Yep.
Burns wet, cold. You can start it with flint and steel.
Okay.
Inside that it probably causes cancer in California, but I'm in Colorado, so I'm good.
Yeah. How does it compare to Vaseline on cotton swabs and stuff like that?
Nothing compares to this except C4.
Okay.
C4 lights like this too and burns.
Okay, where do you get these
So
trioxane tablets?
it's 49 cents at the Army surplus store, and I've never seen you can get them on, I don't know about shipping, but you can get them on Amazon, I think. But I mean, literally, I have tried everything in the world. And if you were to say, hey, Aaron, what's one thing that's kept you alive?
Yeah.
Trioxane would be in the list. Like, can't feel my fingers shaking like a cat scrapping razor blades, and I'll get this started and I can get a fire going. Now, Colorado, you can fart and the fire will start, right? Everything is dead. But like Washington and Oregon, when I hunt out there, or North Idaho, now if you look at that moose hunt Ryan and I did, you can't get any wetter than North Idaho. You can get as wet.
Yeah.
I still had 5-foot fires going. Now it took a minute to get that going because everything's soaked.
Right.
But once you get the little sticks dry, they catch, and then you put bigger sticks on there. Little sticks are catching the bigger sticks, and then you just circle the stove with the wood, and it dries itself while the other wood's burning. You're not going to be able to just chunk in Yuletide logs in there, get going. So
right. So when you're starting a fire in your tent, then in that situation, you're using the trioxane tablets, and you're just doing regular fire starting skill. But you're just using small tinder as much as you can, as dry stuff as you can, get it going. What you're saying is once you get it hot enough,
it'll dry off anything.
It'll dry it out and it'll burn it.
Well,
and then you're also gathering wood and bringing it into the teepee to put around the stove so that in the next days following, you also have enough dry material to keep a fire going.
Right. And with the wood stoves, people have this idea that, they're like, does it burn all night? Well, it's a 2-pound stove. No, it doesn't burn all night. Right? It's like my wife. She wants the gun that blows down trees, doesn't make noise, and doesn't kick. They don't make one of those. Well, if it burnt all night, I would be a millionaire, right? It's just, you got a 15 to 30 or 45-minute burn time.
Right.
But the idea is before bed, you get it, you keep it going. It gives me something to do, throw wood in it. And then before bed, you crank that thing up.
Yeah.
You dive in the sleeping bag. You're, fall asleep. You wake up, it's freezing cold, but the wood is dry that's been around the stove. And then you poke your head out of the fart sack, start trioxane, put some wood on top of it. And then you don't get out of the sleeping bag until it's 75 degrees in the tent.
Right.
You're good.
Yep.
So it's not meant to burn all night. Now, some of them burn longer than others, but like this, I'm about to go on this turkey hunt. Whether I'll see even a turkey, I don't know, but it's 5 miles in and it's through snow because, it's at 10,000 feet. Now, I'm taking a super tarp and the annex, which is just like the front end of it.
Yep.
And that new cylinder stove. Now, for me, I don't like getting cold at all. Like everybody gives me crap because you could hang meat and make jerky in the teepee when I'm in there. Like I keep it just cranking. Yeah. Well, in that little super tarp, it doesn't take a whole lot to heat that up. So I'm only throwing in like sticks that long, like the size of my finger or my thumb, every 10 minutes, throwing 2 of those in. It's hot, like Brokeback Mountain, sleeveless t-shirt and underwear hot. Like it's like to the point. Well, last weekend, it was so hot, it was snowing outside, that literally we were all down to lightweight shorts and a T-shirt because I wanted to get the ground dry. So I was feeding that thing like it was damned, like it was burning, 3 feet red. So the stove is hard to beat. And we had a guy, Dave, he runs Yeti mountain bikes. He's their R&D guy.
Yep. And
he was kind of like, oh, a teepee, whatever. Well, we got back and he ordered one immediately because he doesn't like getting cold either. Yeah. And he can take that mountain biking.
I don't like getting cold either. I hate being cold. And in Alaska, on Prince of Wales, when it was raining like it was, you're kind of helpless. Once everything got wet, you just kind of had to live with it. And thankfully, it wasn't that cold outside. I mean, the temperatures weren't cold. You were just wet. It was actually pretty warm. It was August. So in spite of the rain, it was still warm. Otherwise, we would have had to come off the mountain if the temperatures were low enough and you're wet, you're screwed. But the temperatures were high, very high, in spite of the rain.
Yeah.
But yeah, a teepee would be nice. I did wonder about the cylinder versus the square. Do you bring a jet boil or type of stove with you? In addition to that, do you cook on the stove? How do you like to do that?
Well, Patrick makes fun of me because I don't cook on this. I don't cook at the house. Or eggs is about as good as I get, and he cooks like 5-course meals.
Yeah.
That's not me. Like I don't do that, and so I bring generally like if I bring the most I'm going to do is throw my bagel on top and warm my bagel up. Like that's as good as it gets. So the cylinder stove for guys like me that just need a heat source
Yeah.
is great because even the big one is under 2 pounds. So like if you're running a super or a mega tarp and then a 18-inch cylinder, like with the super tarp, you're under 3 pounds with the stove and the pegs. So everything to set it up, you're under 3 pounds with shelter, stove, and pegs to hold it in.
Wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
And how does that compare then to the square?
The
Weight-wise?
squares, well, it depends. Like a medium square stove's 3 pounds, 9 ounces, or 4.3. I can't remember, but it's twice as heavy.
So the cylinder one is significantly lighter. I mean, that's a big weight difference.
Yeah, I mean, it's so light that like I never take a stove during bow season. And this year I'm probably going to take one at least the second half.
Yeah.
But
Why not?
well, like last year I got back from the territories, basically came back for a day. And then I met James and we flew into this area. Now, Colorado, I generally don't have to worry about rain. I didn't bring rain pants. I never wear those. Well, it rained every day. And I didn't have a tarp with me. I grabbed a tent. And I mean, nothing wrong with the tent.
Yeah.
But as I'm laying in the tent, I'm thinking, why didn't I bring a stove? I work for a company that pioneered this, and I don't have a stove because I was soaked to the point, literally like the one day the sun came out, we're all in our underwear. I mean, it didn't look good, and clothes everywhere, and we're just laying there drying out because everything was so wet.
Yeah.
So,
All right. That's good to know. So you still bring your mountain house type meals and your stove, your cooking stove.
yep, and I don't.
Gas.
Yeah, I use an Omni light more than anything now, a Primus. It's actually a white gas stove. I don't use the cylinder stoves that much anymore.
Yep.
The Omni light's titanium, and you get a little bit of a weight penalty with it. But there's a few things that, not to do a sales pitch for Omni Light, I'm not sponsored by them or anything, but one, if you have to depend on a buddy, like my buddy Ryan Avery, to get me isobutane canisters,
Yeah.
and then you show up and he didn't get them, and you have to wait till 10 o'clock the next morning,
Yeah.
the problem. So with an Omni Light, you can put diesel, gasoline,
Anything.
whatever in it. And then in a survival situation, I can take that fuel and just help me in my trioxane burn out and start a fire. The other thing is too, is they never go down ever. They hardly ever break. They're field maintainable. They work better at altitude and they work better at cold weather. The only real thing you can complain about is the weight because you have a fuel bottle. The other thing, if you think about it, last year alone, it's like $5 for a fuel canister.
Yeah.
You know, give or take.
Right.
I'm getting however many tin boils off of that. Plus, I use it to heat my hands up. Now, I could have bought my daughter a car for what I spent in those. For $16 of white gas, that'll last me like a year.
Yeah.
So 1600. I mean, I'm from Oregon, but I'm smart enough to know that's a good deal. So I'm running those Omni lights pretty much exclusively now.
Okay. That's good to know. I mean, I've heard the argument, both ways. And it seems like if you're going into the Northwest Territories or you're getting dropped somewhere by a float plane, or some bush plane somewhere, you want gear that's versatile, that's certainly bomb-proof.
Well, and I think everyone's opinion is really a strong opinion of theirs until it bites them. And I mean, this isn't like coming from a guy that just knew that was the right thing to do in the beginning. Wait till a canister leaks, a canister freezes. You'll be like, man, this canister thing's just a horrible idea, because I've had canisters leak, canisters freeze, my buddy not get canisters, where that thing, it's on time every time. It never lets you down.
Yeah, that's interesting. So I'm taking some notes here. I want to go back to the cot. What was that thing? Luxury
Luxury light.
light.
Yeah.
I want to check that out because that certainly would handle the problem that I've experienced with being on the ground in these wet conditions. And if I can be up off the ground and have a stove and be able to dry out my gear, man, I'm set. I mean, that's a whole nother level of being able to stay out. And I know that when I'm hunting and it's cold and miserable like that, it impacts my drive to stay out there and keep pushing it.
Well, I mean, and I've got a lot of hunts planned this year. Like one of the things that we talked about is a lot of guys, you can't handle more than 5 to 7 days at one time. Starts to mentally you break down.
Yeah.
Well, it's amazing what Ranger television does, fire, right? It's like a big thing. And so if that extends your hunt a few days for a minimal amount of weight, like with the cylinder, which is why I was so excited about that cylinder stove.
Yeah.
If I'm like, not going to freeze to death, that's pretty exciting. So really like the hunt we're doing in the sand graves, my buddy drew a sheep tag. That's like the cursed earth. There is no tree. I mean, you can see trees a couple thousand feet below you. So that's a tarp bivvy type of an area, one person tent, ultralight. But like the elk hunts and stuff like that, I mean, even if I use, let's say in a 12-day hunt, it rains 2 days and I only get that stove out,
yep,
it's worth its weight in gold. And I mean, in your case, you're going to be using it every day. I mean, it always rains up there. So
that'd be nice. Okay, so another question. Last week you shot that monster, not last week, it was a little bit before that, but
yeah,
you shot that monster bear in northern
Yeah.
Idaho. So I haven't got the story on that yet. So why don't you share with the public how that whole thing went down?
blind shithouse luck is what happened. Really, I mean, it was my buddy Ryan, who, I mean, don't get me wrong, like I would take a bullet for Ryan or give one, but he is not prepared for a whole lot of anything. And so I showed up and, there wasn't really any food like together, which we talked, we'd go to Walmart and get some food. And then the truck wasn't exactly loaded. Like the garage just had stuff everywhere. So we loaded up all of that. And then we killed some time, right? About a day getting that together. And then he said, we were planning on baiting. And he's like, oh, I got a couple bait sites going. Well, I think what he meant to say was, I'm going to set up a couple bait sites. So we get there and I hike in, the bait barrel and some bait. And obviously I'm like, okay, this is probably not going to work out really well because I've got a bow and these guys have 2,000 yard, 338 edge plus Ps and they're long range shooters. So we get back to camp and I'm like, well, Ryan, where have you seen bears I can just walk? I'll walk one down. Of course, he's lived there his whole life. I've seen bears here, and he lists out, and I'm like, okay, what's a place that is good for a bow hunter where, because in Colorado you can stalk. Well, there isn't any stalking in Idaho. There's no spot and stalk.
It's thick.
Doesn't work.
Yeah.
So he told me this area, and so I give him my binoculars because he wanted to try them out. So because he said it's really thick. So for the first 2 miles, he drops me off, and it's about a mile up the road from camp. Like 2 miles into it, I can see like 10 yards. And, I'm thinking I'm going to punch right in the face. So, and we joke around, we get along really well. So like 2.5 miles in, it's starting to wide, open up where I can at least see 40 yards.
Yeah.
Well, I'm like, wind's blowing in my face, positive attitude. I might see one because I've shot a ton of bears off logging roads, a good amount. Yeah. Not one that size, like 200, 250 pounders. Well, 4.5 miles in, I'm like, oh, there's a black spot. Of course, I don't have my bino, so I don't know how big it is. And I'm like, he might be all right. And so I grabbed that camera I showed you earlier. I grabbed the camera and I snapped a couple of photos because he calls me Wang because I take photos of everything. And so he's scrolling through the photos later, like, did you take a photo before you shot it? I'm like, yeah, dude. I was like, I've shot tons of bears. I'm like, if I got away.
Yeah.
Well, knowing now how big it was, I might have been depressed. But at the time, I'm like, whatever. And I took some photos. So I get to that was at 120 yards. Snapped some photos. I dropped my pack, grabbed my rangefinder. And the wind, you couldn't have drawn this out better. Wind's at my face. There's a river or a creek 10 feet from the bear. and the bear's feeding away from me. So all I can see is this big black butt, and I'm like, I think it's pretty good sized. I get to 90, I'm like, oh yeah, it's a good bear. I get to 40, or what I thought was 40, and I'm like, whoa, that's a big bear, right? I'm like, wow. So then it pops its head up, and at that time I wasn't sure I was going to shoot 100% because I've shot a bunch of other bears.
And the wind is still good.
Oh, cranking straight. I could have probably stabbed it. Like, you couldn't have drawn a better stock. So
Sweet.
It pops its head up, and I can see it's got an ear tag, and its head is huge, and its ears are tiny. And I'm like, oh, okay, you're going to die. So and I was shooting a back tension. I used to shoot tournaments a lot.
Yeah.
And I always shoot a back tension it's a Scott Longhorn. But it's got a clicker on it, but I buffed on the clicker so it's not loud because it clicks as I'm shooting. Anyway.
Breaking.
Well, and I didn't reef through the clicker, which this was the first time I'm trying to hunt with a back tension. So I'm like, click, and I'm like, okay, I didn't reef through that. I haven't screwed up yet. And I put my 40 on the top of its heart thinking it was 40. And I just poaxed it. I mean, hammered it. And I'm like, ooh, that's going to die pretty quick. And about the time it took me to say that, it flipped over and died immediately. Like, it went 15, 18 yards.
Wow.
Well, I'm standing there, I'm like, wow, I can't believe that just happened. You could, whoa. So I grab my stuff and I walk up to it. And I mean, literally, I took a minute to walk in a circle around it, like, wow, I've done something special here. This does not happen every day. And then I laid it out. If somebody was watching post on Facebook, because I'm like, this thing's over 7 foot. So I lay down beside it. Of course, I didn't have anybody to take a photo, and I'm like, this is over 7 foot tall. Wow, that's a big bear. And I shot a big one in Washington up around 500 pounds, but it didn't have the head size. So then I'm like, didn't have a tripod like an idiot. So I'm trying to, you've probably been there, little sticks trying to get the camera right.
Yep.
And I get a bunch of photos and I skin it out, and I'm pretty good at that. So it didn't take a long time. Well, I lay my bow, the tip of my cam to tip of cam is 40 inches, just under.
Yeah.
And there's a photo, you might have seen it. The cam only goes to its armpit. So I'm like, whew, that's like 7.5 feet. Holy cow. So I call my buddy Paul. I'm like, dude, you wouldn't believe this. I shot a monster. And he was like, how big? I'm like, dude, I think it's Boone and Crockett. I'm like, it's huge. I'm like, if it's not Boone and Crockett, it's certainly Pope and Young, and it's like a 7. And so then I called Kenton from First Light because, we had been talking, because we were talking about him maybe coming up, and I'm like, and this is on a sat phone, which if anybody's ever used a sat phone, you don't ever fight with your wife on a sat phone, right? You hang up a lot. So 3 calls to Kenton, and he's like, did you say 7-footer? And I'm like, yeah, can you hear me? And so I don't know if he heard, but I'm like, whatever, I need to get this thing off the mountain. So then, I'm trying out a bunch of new stuff with Kifaru. So I'm like, well, this is a good test. So I just start, of course, no game bags. I mean, I'm like, didn't grab game bags. So I just cram that bear hide 3/4, and I put the back straps in the hide and folded them up and just start cramming. And I get 3/4 and the back straps in there, the head and the hide. And I, camera gear, and I mean, the pack is about to explode. And I've got 4.5 miles to the road. And I'm thinking, I'll be there about dark. Somebody will be waiting. So I get to the road. It's like a 140-pound pack, right? And don't get me wrong, it was downhill. But I'm hunched over at the road, and I'm like, there's no one here. I'll just sit here, and they'll come get me. I'll walk to camp. So I walk into camp, and Brock Akers and Justin Crosley had come over from Washington. Yeah. And they're there, and I hadn't seen them yet. They, you know what I mean? They'd been hunting when we came up. So I'm like, will you pull this pack off of me? And they're like, did you get one? And I'm like, I have a bow in my hand, not a gun. And they're like, where's Ryan? I'm like, I don't know. He just dropped me off. And they're like, what? And I'm like, I just walked up a road and shot it. No kidding. So when Ryan came back, he grabs my camera and he's flipping through the photos, and he thinks it's one I shot in British Columbia. So he's like, you liar. And then he scribbles the photos over, and there's a terrain feature. He's like, you shot that here? And because it's laying there, and I'm like, yeah, dude, I shot it here. So we took it in, and it had dual ear tags that were so old that they were like aluminum or stainless steel, and it just had one number on it, no other identification. So it was from what we can understand and what have told us, the bear's like 22 years old, and it was tagged in the early 90s.
That is awesome.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the story. It's really not that much of a story, minus the funny stuff that went along with it. Because one, I've shot black bears walking around on logging roads. They're generally about 200 pounds, the standard Idaho black bear.
Yeah.
This one looked like a grizzly when I saw it, and it was probably,
That is a huge black bear.
well, of course, everybody like, oh, it's not that big. They're bigger, whatever. Well, I've shot a lot of bears, and I've shot a lot of average bears. This was a 400. I couldn't move it. I couldn't move it around. So it was about, we're guessing about 400 pounds. And it still had the calluses on its pads. So it was only out of the den a couple days. So
Did you get the skull measured yet?
well, they're measuring it now. The guy gave us a rough dimension, but I'm not even going to mention the score because till it dries, because you know how people get with that, like, oh, whatever. So
Yeah.
Well,
the thing too, on a bear like that, some of them don't have the biggest heads, yet they're just monster animals. The bear I shot in Alaska, he was 7x7, but that's a coastal bear on Prince of Wales Island.
Well, what was funny is I had just gotten a phone call, not a good phone call, about my presence in the industry is fake because I don't hunt that much anymore. I help guys out. And so it was funny because my buddy Ryan's like, well, why don't you just hunt for yourself all year and not help anyone and give these guys the big middle finger? Because when I actually hunt, I kill a ton of stuff, but I usually help guys.
Yeah.
So I told Ryan, I'm like, look, dude, I need to not photo and film and, kill a big bear for myself, because last year I just took photos of everyone. Yeah. Well, then I shot that bear and he was laughing. He was like, yep, that worked. He's like, didn't plan on it happening the first day, but it was a cool deal. So,
well, the thing is, I think on that stuff, I think as you get older, you get a lot of pleasure out of helping other guys shoot their first animals or tag out, or filming or photography becomes a bigger part of the hunt. I know as I've gotten older that my desire to kill the biggest, baddest bull elk in the woods or a giant bear, I don't necessarily go hunting for those reasons anymore.
Yeah.
I still want to, and I excited about it, but helping my dad be successful or buddies be successful is as important to me. I don't just go for that monster trophy anymore. It's I guess there's more to hunting to me now.
Well, and I'm the world's worst trophy hunter. Now, don't get me wrong. I've shot like 3 elk in that 340 to 360 range, but it's only because I saw them and thought, okay, I can kill that. But if I ran into a 5x5 before I saw that 5x5 would have probably died. So what my whole thing was like, it was kind of funny because that 90%er article I wrote.
Yeah.
It was about that this guy didn't think I should have written the article because I don't have a bunch of 400-inch elk. And it's like, well, I kill stuff every year and I'm involved in a lot of hunting. And I didn't get too Twitter-pated about it because usually the guy must drive a giant jacked up truck and have a tiny, ding-a-link. I'm like, dude, is it that big of a deal? Like, you hate me that much that...
Yeah.
Because it's like...
Well, that was the article you're referencing is the one that you wrote for Eastman's. And in that article, you talk about what it takes to be a very successful hunter, right?
Yeah. And I was like, it
doesn't mean trophy hunter. It means successful hunter.
Well, he and I argued about that for a sec, and he was like, well, 10% of the hunters... his whole thing was, I should be a better trophy hunter to have like the status to write that article. And it's like, well, I've killed almost everything in North America with a bow. I've, mountain lion, coos, deer. I've hunted everything.
Yeah.
It's not necessarily all of them are big, and I'm not bragging by any means because I'm not a great trophy hunter. But I also can't afford landowner tags when I've shot like my goat, my sheep, stuff like that, where on super budgeted hunts, somebody that had money brought me. And so I did get a kick out of, I'm sure he has his own psychological problems.
There's a lot of that though that goes on in the hunting industry. There's a lot of it that's ego driven, and there is a lot of, I mean, and let's face it. I mean, your article is quite. You're basically pretty blunt. I mean, that's
Just like get off the couch and go hunting was what the article was.
Yeah.
You know, people were like, not everybody gets to be in the field 200 days a year. And it's like, dude, I used to work construction. I know, right?
Well, what's funny about that too is that being in the field that many days a year gives you more experience about just living out there than the average Joe does anyway. So, I mean, one guy might go out for 2 weeks a year and kill a monster, let's say a monster elk every year. Does he know more about woodcraft or field craft or
Sure.
than the guy that's out there 200 days a year? I mean,
Well, and that's my thing is, and this is what I told this little chucklehead with that. Dude, my thing is survival, backpack hunting, things like that. You don't ever hear me talk about hunting tactics too much. Now, I scout a lot and I find a lot of big animals, but you'll never see me ever claim I'm the greatest hunter in the world ever. Because now, if you want to do survival, like a competition and that, yeah, I'm probably going to do okay in that competition.
yeah.
But my thing's more about gear, what works for the extended days in the field. But you want me to talk about trophy hunting mule deer? I'm going to say, hey, go talk to Robbie Denning because he actually shoots trophy mule deer. I see 160 deer, it's going to die, right? I like shooting animals. So, but I mean, for me, I get enough guys that say thank you for helping them with gear lists and things like that. That, like I said, the chuckleheads that say bad things, it's like, well, I can forward my phone calls to you if you want to help these guys on gear and questions with that. You can answer them all, and let's have that conversation.
Well, I'll tell you that I like good gear. I like to be comfortable. I like gear that performs, that's lightweight but effective. And there are a lot of guys out there who post articles in magazines, and it doesn't take me long to look at what it is that their gear list for me to know whether they really know what they're talking about when it comes to gear.
Yeah.
And I'm no expert, but it's interesting because when I see their gear list, I'm like, well, I stopped carrying that 7 years ago, because that is not the way to do this particular, this type of hunt with that piece of equipment. And so, like I said, I think there's a lot more that goes into being qualified to talk about this than simply whether you kill the biggest animals in the world.
If you're buying landowner tags or you're hunting trespassing through landowner, don't get me wrong, like there's nothing to be taken away from that. But shooting a 400-inch bull on a landowner tag means that you have the discipline to pass animals up, you know how to judge animals, and you can call and you know how to hunt elk.
Yep.
Does that mean if that guy and me get dropped off in the middle of the Hindu Kush in Afghanistan, who's going to come make it back?
Right.
I know I will because I'm here. So a big difference, right? Like everybody's good at their own little thing. And in the case of what we're talking about with this guy, it's like, dude, you want to be the trophy hunting expert, like alpha male, dude? Take that place at the head of the table, and I am A-okay with that because I don't, he was like, that I was putting off a persona as an ultimate hunter. And I'm like, dude, you and I aren't arguing. I agree with you. I'm not this ultimate hunter, dude. I kill things every year. I'm very comfortable in the field. I'm very physically fit, and I like to help guys with its working out. But when it comes to if I'm on a stalk at 180-inch deer and a 165-inch deer walks in front of me, I'm not going to make it to the 180-inch deer because I see red blackout and I shoot what's in front of me. That's I like shooting animals. So,
I like having meat in the freezer.
Yeah.
I really do. Doing a lot of CrossFit and just trying to eat as healthy as I can, as clean as I can. That means I eat a lot of animal meat, a lot of animal fat, along with a ton of vegetables, a lot of fruit, but I try to eat just whole foods. And in that, so I eat deer and elk all year, and then anything else I can get in between.
On that note, and I know you're supposed to be answering the questions, and sorry, phone's going crazy. On this whole, because there's like haters at Facebook right now about the mountain ops, everybody promoting mountain ops and the physical fitness selfies, and there's a lot of hatred going on with that. Now, I'm going to give you my opinion of all that, and then I want to hear yours because I know you do CrossFit and you're a fit guy.
Yep.
Now, I understand people getting tired of guys just working out and then not actually going out in the mountains. And I feel like, obviously, I'm in the mountains a lot and I work out. The way that I look at it is I can understand if people get tired of seeing that, but the world as a whole, or the United States, is fat, and we are getting fatter. So if a fit guy is promoting fitness and helping others, or a fat guy is trying to get fit, is it really that big of a deal that he throws a couple hashtags on there? I mean, guys bash Cam all the time. Now, it's not like I'm a huge Cameron Haynes fan, but let's face it, he's fit. He's a machine, like he's a mental machine. Like his gear list sucks, and he goes out and he still, he still goes, right. He doesn't carry the best gear, but is it like? I understand there's haters and everything, but at least Cam is promoting fitness. Like he's promoting people to be better. And it's like, if people could like take a big step back, chill out, take their own emotions out of it and think, you know what? This guy's trying to help out and get people in shape. Is he posting selfies and, gym pictures? Yeah, but get over it. You'll be okay. At least he's helping others. So anyway, I'm kind of curious. What do you think about that? And what have you seen on that seen the hatred on there on Facebook about it?
I don't post much about my own, PRs or, any workouts that I do. Now and then I'll post something on Facebook, but I actually haven't got into it much on podcasts. I haven't got much into it in my social circles or on Instagram because of the negative attitude that people have toward that. I don't want to feel like I'm bragging or showing off or coming off the wrong way. So I'm kind of careful about it. But at the same time, like you said, a lot of times I just want to share it because it was a goal I had and I achieved it. Maybe it was a strength gain or, maybe a speed thing on some kind of workout or just some benchmark for fitness that I achieved. But I haven't shared a lot of my own stuff because I don't want that negative blowback. Because
what do you think of the haters? Like, if you had one of the guys, what would you say to him?
Well, part of the issue is that this is the other half of this equation is I've had a ton of friends and family members and so forth come to me and say, what do I eat? How do I get in shape? How do I get mobility back? How do I get strong? How can I go day after day? As I'm getting older, I hear my knee's just busted. It just won't work anymore. Or my hip is whatever. And I talk to them and I tell them things that they can do to improve and I give advice and people don't take it. They're like, oh, okay. Well, that's just you. You're kind of genetically different so I get a lot of that. And after a while it becomes discouraging to even sort of share a lot because you got a friend that comes to you and says, I want to learn. And then you tell them how to do it and then they don't do it. I'm sure you get that all the time. Like, Aaron, give me some advice on this thing I'm going to go do. And you give them advice and they're like, oh, and then they don't do any of it.
I used to write diet plans and I'm by no means am a dietitian, but now it's pretty funny. I'm like, quit eating salt, quit eating fake sugar, eat natural sugar, cut your salt down, drink lots of water, quit eating enriched wheat and flour. Donuts are bad. If you think it's wrong, it's wrong.
Yeah.
And then I'll get guys that send me messages I'm on and they'll write down their diet and that I'm training this much. And I'm like, I can't send back you're lying, but I want because if they were that, I mean, they're ready. I'm like, okay, you've taught, you don't need my advice. If you're doing that, I'm a cookie eating fool. So you're beating me off of that diet, but I think that's what they want to do.
Yeah.
And then they want me to know that they're doing that and for me to give them encouragement. When in reality, I mean, it takes some serious self-discipline to buckle down. Like, well, I used to be fat and then I got really like roided out,
Yeah.
It took, I'm down to like 198 now. And at one time I was 270.
Yeah,
I've been working. I was benching over 500 pounds clean, like no shirt, nothing. Well, that doesn't do a whole lot of good in the mountains. So for the last 5 years, I've concentrated on eating my muscle away, like as much as I can,
Yeah.
keeping my core strong. But oxygen and muscle, well, muscles take a lot of that, and so I'm trying to shrink them. Now, don't get me wrong.
You want the balance.
Yeah, I don't want to look like a, whatever. I don't want to look like Lance Armstrong. I want some muscle on me, but
Yeah.
I've tried to find that happy medium, which I've about found. 195 to 200, I can rock and roll all day long with a pack on and not have issues and keep my cardio just fine.
Well, as for like haters, that are out there, it's kind of like this with everything that I do. I try not to let it even affect me. I just kind of ignore it for the most part. But people who get down on guys like Cameron Haynes, because I think with Cameron, the guy inspires a lot of people. He exercises. He's a fit freak. He does a lot of things that and a lot of fitness people especially may not agree with what Cameron's doing or how he goes about it. But I don't think the majority of people out there are at risk of over exercising or over fitness.
No, probably not.
It's just not happening. So I think it's better to push the fitness thing along without worrying about the blowback too much. And I don't know. I fitness is a big deal to me. But not at the. I mean, I guess there are performance goals, like guys want to win a race. I think you might have said this. Maybe I read it somewhere else. But they're talking about, well, I want to bench 400 pounds. I want my Fran time to be sub 2 minutes or something on a CrossFit workout.
Yeah.
I want to, I want to win train to hunt. I want to be goes on and on and on. Well, I want to swim, X meters in such time, and I want to ride my bike, Well, sometimes I just sit there and I'm asking why.
Yeah.
What for? What is your goal for that? And I think a lot of people, they're just doing it because they want to, because they have in their mind that that's something they need to do to be fit.
Yeah, I'll be right back. 1 second. Oh. Sorry. So yeah, go ahead. So the idea in their mind of what they want to do.
Yeah, and I think they got to, whatever they decide they're going to do for fitness, for performance, it's got to align with their values and their goals in life, what they want to achieve. And for example, right now in my life, being able to do a 2-minute Fran time really isn't my big time goal, because it doesn't really add any value to what it is I want to achieve out in the woods,
right,
or with my kids and family. So
Paul just walked in the house here. That's what I was running to the door. And Paul, he and his Paul's word, he talked so much shit about CrossFit that he just had to do it so he could see what it was about. And Paul, how long you been doing it?
Since the beginning of the year.
The beginning of the year, he started doing it. And I mean, like, I'll call him and be like, dude, you want to go shoot? And he's like, tonight's whatever it is he's doing, right? I'm like, that sounds horrible. But Paul's pretty mentally strong. And like with him, I think he just wanted to see what it was about. Is it going to help him? Or is he going to be like me and just laugh at it? And which is like with me, I'm not going to go pull tires and stuff. Well, he's pulling tires and running sprints and everything else. I don't know at the end of the year what his report will be on it, but he's giving it the full gusto. Like he's going all the time. Where for me, I'm like, I'm probably never going to do train to hunt. As long as I can get from A to B, kill something at B and get back to A and not die and do it proficiently. Yeah. That's my goal. Like that's where I want to be.
I think that anything you do to move the fitness needle for you, anything you can do to get yourself in better shape, I applaud that. And so with CrossFit, what's cool about it is there's usually in each CrossFit gym, there's some really great community support that gets you going. But if you have hunting buddies that get out and run the stairs at Red Rocks, and stuff like that, that's the same thing. Train to hunt, I think that's great. If guys want to go do that and compete, there's a whole community around that, the support group that pushes you, and you can share your stuff. And when it comes to brands like Mountain Ops and Wilderness Athlete, and they're promoting outdoor fitness, dude, you're seeing these brands all over the place. Guys wearing the hats, the T-shirts. You're seeing it, all over social media, and I think that's. I don't think that's a bad thing. I think that right there is just showing that people are putting the connection between hunting and fitness, that they're interrelated. And I think it's the same like with Steven Ranilla's Meat Eater show. I love it because he's tied in, diet, health, fitness, all kind of in with that, the whole hunting idea. And I think for too long the hunting community hasn't really pushed the value that we have in eating what we kill. There's this perception that we shoot it and donate the meat and don't eat any of it, or don't even donate it, And, and although there's that out there, but there's a ton of people out there that are dying to get their hands on this meat, that love this meat, that it's part of their way of life to eat this meat every 365 days a year.
Yeah. Well, I think that for whatever mental issues we all have of hating, bashing, whatever it is, that with the Mountain Ops, Wilderness Athlete, you don't need to be in shape to kill an animal. I mean, fat guys have been proving that for 100 years. We know that, right? Like no one, because I promote Mountain Ops, right? Guys are great, like the product.
Yeah.
Do you need to go run the stairs at Red Rocks to kill a deer? Obviously not, because people kill deer every year without running the stairs.
Yeah.
But I'm going to be a lot happier doing it. Like I'm not, because with my schedule, it's back to back to back to back.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when some of the guys I see on Facebook, you don't need this and I'm skinny or whatever else, well, good for you. But you don't see me picking on skinny guys with a flat chest or fat dudes. I don't ever say,
right,
oh, get your, like getting on there saying, hey, you need to do what I'm doing. So when guys are on there saying you don't have to be in shape or you don't, well, yeah, you don't. But it doesn't hurt anything. And as a whole in America, obesity rates what, like 67% now? It's ridiculous.
Higher.
Yeah. So God forbid we get in shape. Worst things could happen. So
yeah, no, I'm all for it. I'm all for promoting fitness along with hunting. I think it's just healthy life, healthy. Because for me, hunting is. I love hunting, but it's not. My whole life doesn't revolve around it necessarily. I have family. It's kind of intertwined with my whole life. Hunting is an element of it, just like fitness and exercise is. It's part of my mental well-being. It's part of my spiritual health. It goes in line with other things that I value. So
yeah.
Anyway, we should call this. We hit the hour mark. So.
Yeah. Plus Paul's waiting. We're going to shoot. So
sweet. Well, thanks, Aron. I appreciate you joining. I got some. I'll put some show notes up for this, and I hope guys get some good information out of it. And we do this again here.
We're gonna hit it again next week. You want to?
I do. I want to hit it again next week, and then I'm going to Alaska for a couple weeks, so I'm pretty stoked about that. But next week, before I go, I want to ask you about cameras, kind of some of the gear you're using to take photos, kind of compare notes on some of that, and then some more gear talk, because I've got a ton of that still to ask you about. So
cool.
Anyway, thanks,
good.
Man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me. I'll talk to you next week.
All right, man. Take care.
Yep.